In this video, we're going to look at microbes causing disease. Now, we do know that microbes can be beneficial and we can use those in food production, as we've looked at before. Now, what we're going to focus on now is the microbes that cause disease. Now, the disease and the severity caused by microbes depends on the type of microbe. Some of them are more severe than the others, and they can actually cause lots of problems for people. So viruses, for example, influenza, mumps, chickenpox, smallpox, polio, etc., etc. COVID as well is a type of virus. Bacteria, food poisoning, sore throats, tuberculosis, tetanus, cholera, typhoid, whooping cough, meningitis. Okay, again, lots of examples. And then fungi, fungal sinusitis, athlete's foot, and a few more examples there as well. So overall, we have lots of examples and we usually have to protect ourselves so we don't get infected. So we have things like immunizations and vaccines, which we will look at later. Okay, so microbes itself enter the body in a variety of ways, or they can do. Now, remember that microbes, they're either inside of our body, on our body, or in the environment around us. Now, if they get inside of our body, that causes the disease itself. Now, there's a few places where microbes can enter the body: the eyes, mouth, skin, genitals, ears, nose, and cuts. Okay, so as we know, for example, microbes like the COVID virus can enter through our mouth and our nose. That's why we wear a face mask, to prevent those particles entering our mouth and nose. If you have a cut, for example, you cover your cut so you don't get a bacterial infection, or use antiseptic to stop bacteria growing. Okay, so all of these places are susceptible to getting disease. Okay, so very soon we'll look at how bacteria, viruses, and fungi actually cause disease, but for now we'll just look at how microbes spread. So the spreading of microbes and disease is known as transmission. Okay, we know that, for example, COVID, just a relevant topic right now, is transmitted via airborne particles, so coughing, sneezing, talking, etc. So transmission by air is a good example. A cough or a sneeze can release millions of microbes into the air that could then infect somebody else. Okay, influenza did the same thing. Transmission in water is an example. Dirty water, you can have cholera, for example, in water, giardia as well, all quite bad. Animals is another example. So mosquitoes, with malaria, not really in New Zealand, but overseas, lots of problems with malaria and dengue fever. And they can carry microbes because mosquitoes, for example, are actually sucking up blood from a person, and that blood will then become infected, and then they will then fly over to another person, drink their blood as well, and in that process actually infect them with the malaria. Transmission by contact. Many microbes can be exchanged from one person to another by direct or indirect contact, so shaking hands, etc. Okay, and also sexual contact as well. Okay, so there are more forms which microbes can be transmitted through. One of them is the placenta. So if a mother develops HIV or AIDS infection, it can be passed on to the unborn child through the placenta. And breastfeeding as well, a child can also pick up microbes from the mother via the milk. Okay, so what we'll do now is look at preventing infections, and then in the next video we will look at bacteria causing disease. So we know that we've got barriers in our body that protects our body from getting disease and getting infected. So the human body protects itself in many ways. The main way really is the skin. The skin is such a large organ that protects our body from infection. It's a really good barrier. So the main entry points of the body have special means to keep the bacteria out, as we've just talked about before. Now, in more detail, the respiratory tract aligned with mucous membranes that secrete a sticky substance or mucus, and this helps prevent bacteria from entering into the lungs. Body fluids such as sweat, tears, and urine contain special chemicals to destroy many pathogens. The stomach acid kills bacteria, and the skin itself, as we've talked about, is protein containing keratin, and it's really good at stopping infection. Okay, so this picture here and these details are from your SciPad. So basically explains it in a little bit of a different context. Okay, so we've talked before about natural barriers like the skin, for example, but we've also got white blood cells and antibodies. Now, both of these things help to prevent infection and disease. Okay, so white blood cells called phagocytes engulf and ingest pathogens. So the pathogen is the unwanted organism in our body, like the bacteria. So imagine you have a cut on your hand, the bacteria enters the cut. Your white blood cells that are floating around in your blood will then go to the site of infection and then engulf or eat the bacteria. Okay, phagocytes can trigger inflammation. So that's why you usually get swelling or redness after you've been infected. And that increases the blood flow to the area, meaning that there's going to be more phagocytes, okay, to remove those toxins there. So inflammation is actually a good sign of defense. Antibodies, you've probably heard about these before. So basically antibodies are really good at eliminating certain organisms. So if we look at this example here, this is a bacteria, okay, and that bacteria has these little tiny triangles. Now these triangles are known as antigens. Now antigens are usually presented on the surface of an organism like a bacteria or a virus, okay, and the body knows that these antigens are present, okay. If it knows it's present, these certain antibodies can go and attach themselves to the antibody. Sorry, the antibody can attach themselves to the antigen. Okay. So it's more of a targeted response. Okay. So lymphocytes are specific and will only target specific antigens. Okay, so lymphocyte is producing antibodies. Antibodies are specific to the type of antigen. Okay, and that's kind of why you get vaccinated or immunizations, okay, to build up your immunity and build up the antibodies in your body, so that if you were to have an infection, your body has already got antibodies towards that antigen. Okay, hopefully that makes sense, because without having an infection like that before, so it's the first time you're having it, then you don't have any antibodies in your body that's specific for that type of antigen. Okay, kind of like COVID. Okay, so yes, so basically destroying it before it causes disease. Okay, so white blood cells. Okay, there are a few different types of white blood cells. We just talked about white blood cells in general. Now there are neutrophils. These are the first things that respond to a bacteria or a virus. You have all of these in your body, but certain white blood cells have certain roles in preventing disease. Lymphocytes fight infections and produce antibodies, as we've just said. Eosinophils are used for allergy symptoms. Okay, we don't really need to know about these ones. Monocytes clean up dead cells, and then basophils are used for their role in asthma. Okay, so really these two are the ones you need to know for white blood cells. Okay, so we'll stop the video there. In the next video, we'll look at bacterial infections.